Hope you're all well. I was going to open today with talking a little about Mitt Romney and how, I guess it's one for the column of good luck democracy, the fact that the Republican Party is riven between more principled conservatives who follow Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney in being to a degree repulsed by the behavior of Donald Trump in inciting an armed insurrection to overthrow the United States government in order for Donald Trump to retain power when he was ousted by not only a majority of American voters, but also an electoral college constructed majority of voters. And so I guess you could say Fox addicted Republicans who booed Mitt Romney, and then those who have who at least balance out their Fox News media diet with some footage from other sources so that they're not entirely propagandized into a state of emotional separation from reality. So let's have a little look. There's one poster here who's a pro-Trump Republican that I wanted to show you. How many followers does this woman have? Let's see, nearly 7,000. And she notes that Mitt Romney was booed at the GOP convention in Utah. And she says, what will it take for the GOP do-nothing establishment to get the message? They are finished. We will not support, let alone vote for any GOP candidates that do not support Trump and America first. Primary every single one out. So yes, that does mean that it's possible a lot of Republican candidates will get primaried in favor of more extreme candidates, but it also means there's a potential erosion to the Republican vote, that there are some people who, out of contrarian disestablishment sentiments or anti-establishment sentiments, are not going to vote for the Republican Party again unless, Trump is restored to office. Knowledge Al-Shabazz has turned up and said hi. Hello, Knowledge. Nice to see you. So, yes, let's hear people booing Mitt Romney, but I would also draw your attention to a report that says an organizer at this convention ended up asking the crowd to stop booing, and there was some applause for that organizer. So just to say, there are two distinct camps of Republicans, and it's a pretty significant division. So they booed him.
So what do you think about President Biden's first 100 days? Now, you know me as a person who says what he thinks, and I don't hide the fact that I wasn't a fan of our last president's character issues. And I'm also no fan. Aren't you embarrassed? And I'm also no fan of the president's.
Okay, so that video cuts off at the part where an organizer approaches the microphone. He apparently addressed the crowd. Oh, the link, he says you're not invited to the broadcast. I can fix that. At BC North. Oh, nice. There you go, Brian. You should be able to come online now. If you want, we have Brian appearing today on the broadcast as well, which is always a special treat. He was waiting around for me because I was struggling to get my computer turned on today. It was just a little bit frozen with all of the tabs that I have open, so I'm very compelled to be more disciplined in closing my computer tabs. Let's see, there's Brian. Let's bring Brian up. Hey, Brian.
Hello, how are we doing?
We're good. Love the art, the floral artwork behind your head.
Oh, thank you.
very beautiful accompaniment to seeing your face as well. One other thing I was just going to bring up, Brian, was this something that anti-immunization people are using, the Nuremberg Code. So they're printing out little memes that say, warning to all medical practitioners, doctors and nurses. I was just carrying out orders is not a legal defense. You will be on trial for war crimes and held accountable. So that's them accusing medical professionals of committing war crimes if they administer the vaccine to people in the United States, which is extraordinary given Republicans are supposed to be, by reputation, focused on business and caring about opening things up, all of which is facilitated by the vaccines, which have been clinically trialed and relatively safe compared to the coronavirus, far safer at a collective level. For an individual, there's a very tiny risk of blood clots. What is it, like 7 people had blood clots amongst 7 million people who received the vaccination, which is so interesting because Republicans also have been very dismissive of a 1% death rate. You know, they're like 99% survive, and yet the 0.0007% of people who've incurred a negative side effect that's serious, they're like, well, that's the key issue. And I think it shows that the governing principle of a lot of Republican behavior and policy is contrariness. Yeah.
Well, it always has been. And with the vaccine itself, like you said, that's I figured it out at one point. It's 4.88% of the population has been affected.
0.00008.
Yeah.
Yeah. Percent.
So that's how many people have been affected by the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in a negative aspect. Typically, in any other vaccine that they were running, that would be considered basically a risk versus benefit ratio, because it affects so few people.
Yes.
And once they find out a little bit more data on it, they might be able to figure out, okay, well, which are these people it actually does affect, and test for that prior.
Yes. Yes, they might be able to do more. And of course, as Molly notes, there is a far greater chance of getting blood clots from COVID, which has killed lots of people, not just from pulmonary conditions, but from blood clots and strokes and heart attacks, or just some disruption to heart electrical functioning. So some arrhythmia type of problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what else have you been noticing in Florida? I noticed people have been saying California has 8 times lower rate of infection at this point. So even though Ron DeSantis gets praised all the time by propaganda agents on Fox, essentially Florida's still got significantly more cases per population size than California.
Yeah, we still do. The numbers are trending down slightly. I know the county that I live in, the positivity rate dropped by about 0.75% in the last week, from like just under 8% to just over 7% now. So that's good news, but still we need to see that number go down even further.
Yeah, and it's 1% positivity in California.
Yeah, exactly. In just the one county that I'm in, which is not even a very populous county, is still at 7.5%, 7.25%, somewhere around that rate. So it's nowhere near as good as places like California, where they're still, I think they still have stricter rules on masks. I think they still have some stricter rules on social distancing, restaurants and things like that. I know here they've pretty much opened up everything here. Businesses still have signs on their doors that say you must wear a mask to enter, but I've noticed a lot fewer places are enforcing that. And even employees inside certain businesses, I've noticed in privately owned gas stations and stuff like that, I'll walk into a gas station. I'll be like, wow, the clerk's not wearing a mask. And
Yep.
I've left a gas station before because of that.
Yep.
So, I mean,
It's
myself, I
unfortunate
don't
because the
feel like I'm going to
employee
get
particularly
infected.
they need to protect themselves.
Yeah.
They're the ones having more exposure.
Yeah, because there's dozens upon and even hundreds of people coming into that store in a daytime in a day's time for them versus I'm only in there for 5 minutes or somebody else is only in there for 5 minutes, but they see dozens upon dozens upon dozens of people.
Yeah. Well, duration of exposure is a factor. So at least the many people they see, the risk is going up because of the number of people they see means some of those people could be asymptomatic carriers of COVID. But at least the window of exposure is relatively smaller, say, compared to someone going to a church service for a few hours and being around people who are singing indoors without wearing masks. So I've noted doctors on Twitter saying that, we mustn't forget that the vaccine is really making all of this possible. We're not there yet, and people are preemptively relaxing the measures. But I mean, it's true that it's less risky to not wear a mask outside. So there's that. And I know some people are feeling so cautious still because they've suffered so much. And you've been in situations where so many people had COVID that it felt risky to step out of the house at all without wearing a mask everywhere you go. But I think the George Floyd protests underlined that as well, is that there wasn't a spike with those protests. It really is okay to be outside as long as people are not hanging out with each other for too long. Like in George Floyd, they're all moving forward, so you didn't have that consistency of exposure. And of course, then many people were wearing masks as well, which minimized the chance of it being a super spreader event. So there's some plus side. Some of the caution, it's okay for people to relax a bit. But yeah, it's a shame that there is so much narcissism and self-interest and kind of sabotaging self-interest getting exposed on the part of the type of people who are refusing vaccination and refusing to continue with precautions.
Yeah, and I've noticed one of the things I've noticed, we've seen a drop off in numbers recently. In the past 2 weeks, we've seen a sharp drop off in hospitalization visits.
Awesome.
But the numbers that we are seeing are
Younger people?
They tend to be a little bit younger people.
Mm.
I know we had a patient not much older than myself just die of COVID the other day. And that was a real rough case because, I mean, we did everything we possibly could for this patient. And in the end, it still wasn't enough.
Yeah, it is really heart-rending, particularly when younger people die and they've got dependents or just they're at the beginning of an exciting new era of their lives. I mean, nobody wants to die. Nobody wants to die just when they're about to retire and enjoy their golden years. Nobody wants to leave this earth precipitately, but it must be extra hard for healthcare providers to see someone young.
Yeah, and like Molly was saying, there's a greater chance of blood clots from COVID, and we suspect that that's probably what happened to him. We think that he probably had a blood clot that went to his heart and caused him to have a massive heart attack.
Yeah.
Because there was just no getting him back.
Yeah, yeah, and that's probably contributing to a death toll that evades recognition or evades being tallied up in some respects, because people could be released from hospital and then go back and just have a higher degree of likelihood that they'll have a blood clot and a stroke or a heart attack and succumb. Yes, Connor? You want to make jelly?
Can this be my one?
Yes. Daddy will need to boil some water because you have to mix the jelly powder with...
Could you write down the ingredients if he knows?
Oh, yeah, I know. Daddy knows what the ingredients are. The ingredients of jelly is just to take a jelly packet and hot water. So Daddy will have to pour in the hot water part, but then you have to add some cold water as well. Jane's here and says, hello. Oh, Knowledge has his own... Oh, hi, Jane. And... Vincent says, Brian, your new house looks nice.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We've done, I've done a bunch of little small projects around here, just fixing a few things up, hung all the pictures, and replaced a bunch of fans that were in here that weren't quite up to snuff. So
that's good. I'm just looking at my bookmarks to see if there's anything else that I was keen to talk about. And one looked hopeful originally, and I was so excited to share it, that there was a Verizon plan that doesn't require customers to pay carriage fees to Fox News, and including Tucker Carlson's white supremacist rhetoric. But then someone else said that it didn't work out for them. So it's something to try, to at least contact Verizon to see if their plan could work out for you, if you could avoid being compelled to support white supremacists. I'll just take you and I off the screen for a second, Brian, so everybody can see this. I hope that's big enough. Maybe if I click on this. Verizon Fios. What's Fios?
Fios.
Yeah, Fios.
It's their fiber optic internet.
So fiber optic internet. So they had a plan that doesn't include Fox News on their basic local cable package, and then they allow you to add your 5 most watched channels. So you handpick those for yourself, your 5 ones, and any additional sports and premium channels on top. So that's really exciting to try as one potential way, if people still want to keep cable, to try that as a potential solution, because if we want to defeat white supremacist rhetoric in the United States, it's kind of key to not be having that level of sort of poisonous disinformation being constantly injected into the discourse. And when you think about it, 39% of Marines have been refusing to be vaccinated. And that's probably because of Tucker Carlson's campaign against the vaccine, as well as other people on Fox News disparaging medical professionals such as Dr. Fauci and promoting solutions to COVID that aren't supported by the medical establishment, such as hydroxychloroquine, to feed a cesspool of ego gratification at the expense of common sense. So people are congratulating themselves on Fox News giving them the secrets about how the establishment is lying to them. And really all they need to do is take hydroxychloroquine, or just at least definitely not take the vaccine and just coast on other people taking it. Because, why should you expose yourself to the potentially tiny, tiny risk of blood clots when you could just make everybody be exposed to a high risk of blood clots from COVID, because COVID can't be contained properly, because herd immunity through vaccination levels can't quite be reached because of holdouts in certain communities. Vincent likes...
As I say, it's because of disinformation being spread by places like Fox, and people turning to illegitimate news sources like Breitbart and reading QAnon posts and stuff like that.
Yes. So many sources of disinformation, and with such a cumulative destructive impact on American life. So America is feeling now a little legislatively revitalized, in that Biden is getting to do a lot of things that Democrats would have been doing for decades if they weren't obstructed by a Republican Party that's just seemingly intent on harming America for the sake of it, for the sake of exercising power, and also for pandering to the more extreme profiteering instincts of various corporate vultures. And I say vultures instead of humans, and I should say humans, but I am happy to do that. But I'll also take a step back later and go, oh, am I being hypocritical? Because I've advocated so much for people not to call their political opponents vermin or rats or cockroaches, because to me that's pre-genocidal rhetoric that helps facilitate the escalation of rhetoric that turns murderous. When you start to view people as being like an insect, then you are more comfortable advocating for them to be crushed. So vultures, is it just more of a literary reference? Am I just being poetic when I say vultures, and it's not as people don't run extermination drives for vultures as much as they do for, say, cockroaches or rats. I'll think about it at my leisure. Molly is noting that Fox News is dangerous and says, I'm going to look into whether or not I can report them to the FCC. Well, that's interesting, because I'd heard Fox News had a defense once in court of saying that they're essentially an entertainment network and therefore can't be held to more stringent standards for a news channel. But the thing is, people do rely on Fox for their news, so I wonder if there could be a replication of that court case, whatever it was in the first place, potentially in front of a more sympathetic judge this time that would acknowledge Fox is the news source and the sole news source for millions of Americans, and that the disinformation promoted on that channel is causing Americans to sabotage public health, as well as potentially sabotage their own health. Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I was trying to find a post that I was looking up on Twitter. I don't know if you had seen it or not. I saw a couple people had posted it. It's whatever her name, Judge Janine, whatever her last name, I can't even think of her name, saying God made me the way I am.
Oh, liar.
And the comments in there are pretty good. I will just say that it was worth a good laugh just to go through the comments.
She has said a lot of things today.
Yeah.
Oh, there's something from MSNBC. Oh, this is a compilation. Okay, Brian, I'm going to share this one, and it's going to be funny. It's going to be Rudy Giuliani, the day the election was called for Joe Biden, and he raised his hands to the sky because he was in the middle of holding a conference outside the Four Seasons Landscaping Center instead of at the Four Seasons Hotel. So the media was already gathered out on like the pavement next to a crematorium and an adult bookshop going, what is this? And Rudy Giuliani's gang had just put some Trump posters behind him to make it look more official. And then when they said, oh, the election's just been officially called for Biden, he was like, who called it? And they said, all the networks. And he was like, all the networks? Like, really? So the networks get to decide the election and not the courts? It's like, no, the American people get to decide the election. But yes, the court system was very soon to decide against Rudy and all of his nonsense. But I'll just play that video now. Here we go. It is 37 seconds long.
NBC's Jonathan Deans to New York saying that federal investigators have executed that search warrant.
Yeah, that's Paula Reed into the conversation because we have some breaking news courtesy of the New York Times. Federal investigators just executing a search warrant on the home.
Thank you, Harris. Top of a brand new hour, and we are following the breaking developments on this search warrant carried out.
Oh my goodness, all the networks. Wow. All the networks. We have to forget about the law. Judges don't count. All the networks.
NBC's Jonathan Deans to New York
So
saying
that was
federal investigators
great
have
kind of
executed.
auto replays, but oopsies. Oh. Press too many buttons. Okay. So that was a little bit gratifying. I'm sure the single Republican black senator, Senator Tim Scott, was very happy to have all those headlines because publicity is good when everybody thinks tribally, even if they're criticizing you for essentially lying to the American public about what the Republican Party stands for and what their legislative goals are. But I realize now it was also bait. It was to see how many Democrats could they call to be removed from office for using racial slurs against Tim Scott, because a black Democratic Congress member from Georgia, anyway, someone referred to Tim Scott as an Oreo, which apparently means someone who's surrendered their principles of supporting their own community and their own demographic to buy into the appearance of solidarity with white middle class people. So that's what an Oreo is. A black Democratic politician referred to Tim Scott as being an Oreo without principle, and Republicans have immediately said he must be expelled from politics because of using a racial slur. Yeah. Yeah.
Right after Marjorie Taylor Greene is expelled from politics.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's Democrats who are the most susceptible to that because they have enough principle to go, oh, should we expel someone as a matter of principle? But Republicans are more nakedly interested in pursuing power. Here is Judge Janine on Fox. I don't know that she's saying God made her the way she is, but she's complaining that she doesn't want to take a train and that we are holding her back from being able. Look at that screenshot. Glory. Yeah, it's just a potent illustration of what Fox News is. And we can talk about it all we like from the outside, but I just hope to galvanize a resolve in people to keep finding strategies to pull their financial support from cable packages that involve involuntarily supporting Fox News with some of your carrier fees, even when you don't watch Fox News yourself, because they need to have the legs cut out from under them. They need cancel culture, or as many people are now calling it, consequence culture, to be applied to them. Our children's lives are at risk, as well as the lives of people around the states right now, in light of all the disinformation she pushes.
I don't want you to tell me that I have to take an Amtrak train and not an airplane because you think I should, or because it reminds you of your good old days. I want to go forward in time, not backwards. I don't like your telling me I shouldn't eat a burger. Go tell China or India to take care of their carbon emission problems and stop.
At least she's admitting that carbon emission is a problem, but that has been still a climate science delaying tactic for a while now, to sort of make the admission that it matters, but then say, well, there's no point us doing anything because India and China are still emitting significant amounts of carbon gas and other related climate change gases.
Stop punishing me for what they're doing and then making me pay for it. And you don't tell me anything about my gun or my magazine because you know it's none of your damn business. And if you, I don't want.
So there you go. That was Janine. Oh, you found it. You found your one. Okay, yeah. We'll put your one up on screen as well. More Justice Janine, everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let me see if I can figure out how to play it here. All right.
Maybe I need to click on it. Maybe you could bring her up again and then and it's gone. That's all right. You keep looking while I'll talk about what it is that she's doing, which is she's just writing a script for people. So as a speech pathologist, I know how much it helps people to have something to say if they're in a situation where they find it difficult to defend their actions or difficult to approach a situation. It's complicated, it's convoluted. Having a script guides them and gives them confidence. And Justice Janine is giving Fox viewers a script to keep defending the indefensible, to keep defending sabotaging the futures of their own children and grandchildren, to keep harming America and exposing it to greater risk from climate change. Because yes, we haven't solved India's problems or China's problems in relation to climate change gases yet, but the way to begin is with what's in your purview, to show leadership and not to see it as punishment, but to see it as not being selfish and trying to find solutions to problems that face all of us. So you can't refuse to try and solve a problem because it can't all be solved at once. You just try your best. And it's fascinating in the context of Republican claims to be responsible or to be big believers in individual responsibility, because they're certainly showing that their audience has an appetite and that station has an appetite for dancing away from responsibility, from pretending they have no compunction at all to address the problem of climate change and existential threats to humans, particularly coastal dwelling humans or humans that rely on agricultural products to eat and live, and instead to pretend that because a problem isn't universally solvable immediately, that there's no point attacking the margins of the problem. That is to say, beginning with the consumption patterns of the wealthiest country overall in the world. Molly says her voice just grates my nerves. She also always sounds a bit drunk. Yes.
Yeah,
Which speaks
Judge
to the
Boxwine.
desperation of the fox. Judge Boxwine, yes. Which speaks to the desperation of people whose egos are now contingent on how much script they can get so that they can keep living their lives and feeding their fabricated sense of moral superiority against Democrats or other people, because they've already got Judge Janine Boxwine's scripted lines in their head saying, and how dare you tell me whether I can or cannot eat a burger, and how dare you tell me that I should catch a train, introducing a level of compulsion into it that's not the case, investing in renewable sources of energy and in promoting infrastructure such as trains and fast trains that is not compelling anybody to do anything, that is hopefully providing society with avenues to take that are less costly to society as a whole, less costly in terms of increasing the temperature to a temperature that's more difficult for us to survive. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole, and I've heard other arguments with the whole India versus China thing like that as well. A lot of people don't realize that a good majority of both of those countries are not as developed as we are here in the United States either. So a lot of them still do depend on fossil fuels for electricity and for power generation and for infrastructure, where we still do to a certain extent, but we're trying to move away from it. And her spouting off this rhetoric like, well, let them do something. Well, no, let us do it first and let them follow suit, as they have done
leadership.
after
If
the
you've led the
Industrial
way in
Revolution.
industrialization, then lead the way in solving the problems, the downside of industrialization, the life-threatening, extreme weather event generating downside of burning fossil fuels, particularly when there are alternatives. And it's just a case of, it's just a protection racket for fossil fuel executives that have tried to stymie government efforts to transfer their subsidization patterns to subsidize renewable energy instead of those heavy subsidies for fossil fuel industries, deadly fossil fuel industries. Deadly at a local level because people are more likely to die if they live near a fossil fuel energy generation source. They're more likely to die from inhaling particulate matter that clogs their lungs and increases their susceptibility to lung cancer, or their children's susceptibility to asthma. A host of diseases that are attendant to living near a coal mining facility or a fossil fuel burning facility. Vincent notes that India and China are in fact leading the way in clean tech. They have to be because they are leading producers and need to solve the problem. That's interesting. So you're saying they're leaders because of a circumstantial compulsion. I guess so. I mean, air pollution is particularly bad it's bad in both nations periodically. I remember being in Canberra in Australia. Being in Australia when Canberra had the worst air pollution, the worst air particulate matter levels in the world, and they were using Indian cities for comparison and saying worse than Beijing in China, worse than New Delhi. And that was disconcerting to go, wow, Australia's worst right now because of the out of control bushfires that have occurred in no small part because of increased temperatures and increased dryness of wooded areas, but also because of an anti-science government that refused to take advice about how increased temperatures meant it was going to be a more difficult bushfire season. There were going to be more bushfires, and could they please organize for some aerial firefighting equipment that delivers water really quickly and effectively to areas on fire. Instead, we had to have American firefighters come over, and some of those people were not familiar with Australian terrain, and some American pilots lost their lives trying to help Australia put out its massive bushfires, which is also a shame.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah. Vincent says that geographically local action needs to happen. Here in the Pacific, we need to work on our waterways and the ocean. True, there's so many problems that you could call challenges for humanity to address, to improve our lives and to mitigate the threats that we face. So with the ocean temperatures are increasing as well, and because of the higher carbon levels in the ocean, it's impacting the ability of exoskeleton organisms, because they can't bond calcium to their exoskeletons as well, which makes them more vulnerable to predators. So say crabs with softer shells because of more carbon in the water. So those crabs are more likely to get eaten by predators, and it'll just change the proliferation levels of different species of creatures in the ocean. And a biologist would be able to speak more to that than I can, but it's just extraordinary the number of self-created problems that we face that we still can't address effectively anywhere where there are science-denying conservatives in power. Sean's here and says, howdy, howdy. Hello, Sean. Nice to see you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that, like Vincent's saying, India and China are probably making very good leaps in their clean tech, because a lot of that stuff is coming out of those countries. A lot of stuff is coming out of China. What I was saying is what we need to do is we need to step up our game and be a leader the way we've been a leader in the past in the clean tech industry. I mean, our coal generating plants, like our coal power plants, are cleaner now than they were 20 years ago and 40 years ago and 60 years ago. There are ways to make that energy somewhat cleaner, but not as clean as it needs to be. We need to get away from that dependency totally. Whereas a lot of these other countries that are still using coal as a primary source of generation, they don't have the same laws in place and the same emission standards that we even have here in the United States. Even though some of those were rolled back by Trump, they're still more stringent here than they are in a lot of other countries.
Very true. Very true. I'm noting Molly's comment about the coral reefs are disappearing, and yes, they're just being outright bleached in the warmer temperatures. So they're dying, and then they lose the vibrancy and color that they have from being inhabited by living organisms, and they just become these white skeletal remnants of previously colorful, beautiful, vibrant coral reefs that attracted tourists. And yes. I will just note that Jim Acosta managed to refer to Fox News as being bullshit and a bullshit factory. And that's cool because people's increasing willingness to call out what Fox does is important. Okay, so there's a 30-second clip of it. That's great. We know the right are going to complain and say, how dare you describe us as a bullshit factory? But the thing is, it's true. And one of the problems with fascism is the passivity that it potentially inspires. So America defeated fascism by making sure it didn't get passive and down in the dumps and mopey. That America was, the anti-fascist part of America was energized and active and determined to get Trump out, and turned up at the polls giving Biden the highest number of votes for any president ever. So the same with Fox News. I'm hoping that the left are energized to denounce the steady stream of murderous lies emanating from the Fox hosts and the Fox thought leaders. So here's Jim Acosta for, I'll get us off the screen, Brian, so we can watch Jim Acosta call Fox News for what it is.
This New York Post story that claimed that copies of a children's book written by Vice President Kamala Harris were being given to migrant kids in their welcome kits. That tale from the border didn't just border on BS. This was USDA grade A bullshit. And the reporter who wrote the story resigned, claiming she was forced to make it up. But the damage was done, pumped out over the airwaves at the bullshit factory, also known as Fox News. This New York Post story that claimed that copies of a children's book written by Vice President Kamala Harris were being given.
So people are getting little clips now of just Jim Acosta saying BS at the BS factory, which is cool. So that full story was Jim Acosta noting that the fake story was that copies of a Kamala Harris book were distributed to migrant children at the border, and it wasn't true. And that journalist resigned from New York Post, saying the breaking straw for her was being forced to write that story, which she knew wasn't true. And yet the right-wing media ecosystem doesn't back down even when somebody resigns. They're so hell-bent on spreading disinformation now that even a retraction makes no difference. They're still going on about Biden stopping people from eating meat when Fox News conflated the two, that Biden has a plan to address climate change, and that separately to that, some time before Biden won the election, a study from a university experimented with, well, they hypothesized about what would happen if people ate less meat and said that would make a substantial difference to emissions. And then a Fox News journalist put them together and said, Biden intends to force you to eat less meat. And they spoke about it as if it was a fait accompli, then with that story across the world of conservative media dribble. And that's their method of operation, and unless people are prepared to forcibly call them out, they will keep getting away with that. So let's just have a little sound clip of Jim Acosta saying bullshit.
But the damage was done, pumped out over the airwaves at the bullshit factory, also known as Fox News.
So good. The bullshit factory, also
and
known as
another thing that I would like to bring up too, as far as Fox News goes, there are a lot of my patients that come in that are especially COVID deniers. The first thing they do is want to know what station Fox News is, because it's not the same station on our TV as it is on their TV at home. And they'll be blaring Fox News all night long. And I have to walk away from those rooms sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I can't stand. I can't stand the rhetoric that comes out of the mouths of those people on that network. I hear more of it at work than I ever wanted to hear in my life.
I'm sorry for you, Brian. You have my commiserations, because the consequences of it are so there for you. It's not like just, they're listening to a channel you don't like. They're listening to a channel that's responsible in part for their condition, because listening to Fox would make you take risks that weren't strictly necessary. It would make you decide you're too good to wear a mask and you're too good to get vaccinated. I mean, there are people who aren't Fox News audience members and they still get COVID and they still haven't been able to get a vaccine yet. But with a Fox News viewer, it's more likely to be a purposeful choice to expose yourself to harm and to make yourself a vector for spreading the disease through choice, because you think that's a pro-Trump position to take and you're in love with Trump and you're a cult member, and Fox News has been the vector of transmitting that cult contagion to your brain. So Vincent asks, does personal experience of those patients change their opinion?
Yeah, Vincent, some people, yes, they will tell us or tell myself or another staff member that they didn't think it was as serious as it is. They didn't think people were getting as sick as they were at that particular moment, especially ones that have made it to the point where they've been on a ventilator and gotten off and gotten better. A lot of people that make it to the ventilator don't get better. We're trying to, at this point, a lot of the evidence right now that we're following at my particular hospital and our intensivists are following is we're trying not to intubate people as long as we possibly can, because the evidence shows that that's kind of like a nail in the coffin for some of these people.
Yeah, it probably saps people's will to live as well, having sedatives and a tube stuck down your throat.
Yeah, it kind of really does in a sense. But I have also seen people, Vincent, that Up until they died, they still denied that they even had COVID. We had a patient and his son saying, "Oh, he just has regular pneumonia. He doesn't have COVID. We know he doesn't have COVID. COVID is a hoax." Up until the point the patient literally died, and then after that, I mean, the patient died of COVID pneumonia. That's how it's reported to the state. It's a COVID death because that's what happened. But the family is still in that much denial because I guess they watch that much Fox News or read that much QAnon or whatever it is, wherever they're getting their information. It's mind-baffling to me because you watch or you get updates on the phone about your family member dying of this disease, and us telling you what's happening, how their respiratory status is, how their lab values are getting worse and worse, and these people are still like, no, it's not COVID, it's not COVID, it's not COVID.
I don't think I said hello to Marsha, who said hello before. Hi, Marsha. Thanks for joining in. And Vincent said the civilizations that excel are the innovators, and regulation is the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. Oh, you mean like for Icarus at the bottom, flying too close to the sun, so you need regulation to help fix him when he falls out of the sky. It's an interesting analogy. And Sean noted that there was a guy who said they were going to force us to drink plant-based beer. So maybe he thought beer was made of meat before. Maybe he just wanted to get
I saw that too, because I haven't heard of any pork-based beers or anything like that.
Yeah. Anyway, Vincent and Molly also say that they're struggling with the connection today. It's cutting out. So I'm actually going to go hang out with my kids at the moment anyway. So I will say goodbye and thank you so much for appearing tonight, Brian. It was lovely to see you.
Thanks for having me, Deb.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us. And thank you as well to Molly, Marsha, Knowledge, Vincent, Sean. Sean, if I don't follow you already on Twitter, maybe send me a message or something so I follow you, because I would love to send you an article about someone who's now training to be a nurse. She used to be an anti-vaxxer and she became pro-vaccination. And it was a big deal for her because she'd spent 10 years as an anti-vaxxer. She'd had 3 children.
Can we make the jelly happen?
Yeah, let's go make the jelly, Mai.
Has it been 3 hours?
No, it hasn't been 3 hours. Oh, did you already make it and put it in the fridge? You know, it definitely hasn't been 3 hours, darling. It's been about 30 minutes since then. And that's half an hour.
Do you think I could still touch it for it?
If you touched it, it would just be like touching liquid. It won't have hardened at all. It won't be touching wobbly jelly yet because it hasn't even been 1 hour and you need 3 hours for jelly. Yes, so somebody called Lydia.
The whole day?
No, it'll take 3 hours, darling. That's not the whole day. So
No,
maybe for afternoon
the rest
tea.
of the whole day.
Yeah, for afternoon tea, there'll be jelly available, but that won't be for a while. Yay, okay. I'm just saying
Anyway,
goodbye.
I'm hungry now.
Okay, sweetie, Mummy's just getting off the broadcast. So she said it was a question of finding humility for herself, to find that she had been wrong, because she used to just read the articles that were shared on Facebook, mothers groups and things saying, oh, what's in vaccinations? They're not telling you the whole truth. And with her first child, she had been pursuing a vaccination schedule, but then her child was crying a very high-pitched cry, and the nurse was dismissive of her concerns about what that might be, and she then ran with that instinct to become very anti-establishment. I don't know. It's a long-winded goodbye, darling. So anyway, I'll send you that NPR article, Sean, about Lydia's story and how she ended up finding articles that said, no, vaccines don't cross the blood-brain barrier in children, because that was a big pitch of the anti-vaxxers, to lie and say the blood-brain barrier isn't very established in children, so the vaccine crosses from their general circulation into their brain, and that causes them to get the autisms and the seizures. Once she realized there were studies saying, nope, that's not the case, it doesn't cross that barrier, she was prepared to then consider that she had been wrong. Cheeky! And that she'd been wrong potentially for a long time about a lot of things. And she then was able to have conversations with her child about how, one of her oldest child, about how sometimes grown-ups are wrong, and they realized that. It's this really personal, graceful story. I loved it. And my cheeky baby obviously needs Mummy to go play with her, which I have already said I'll do. So I'm going to say bye-bye. you want to say thank you to Brian, darling? That's the microphone. Do you want to say goodbye, Brian?
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, he said bye-bye back, darling. I'll give you this so you can hear. There you go. You going to say hi again?
Hi.
Say hi, everybody. They can then type a comment to you and you can
Goodbye.
read it if you like. Brian said goodbye, so you could hear that.
My name is Rosie.
Oh, you're going to pretend your name is Rosie. That's cool. Yes, this is Rosie. Cosmic Rose.
Can I tell them how old I am?
Says miss you. Hi, Cosmic Rose.
Can I tell them how old I am?
Yes, you can tell them how old you are.
I'm 6 years old.
Yeah, you just don't say your birthday or anything. You don't give details that are just very uniquely you, but big ones, lots of people in the world are 6. You can say that. Crink Crink keeps saying I'm already immune to it. Natural immunity wears off more quickly than vaccinations. So it's not the case at all that because you've had the Rona, you don't need to get the vaccine. That's my last message. Bye, everyone. Chicky.